Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin. On this Thursday morning, we're almost at the end of 2021, heading into 2022. I'm just going to ask you to hold on one moment for me. One moment. Good morning. Morning, Jenny. Lovely to see you. Sorry about that. I just needed to close the doors. Otherwise, my animals, somebody will walk past and the animals will go berserk and start barking and do their thing. So I had opened them and then I had forgotten to close them. So I've just closed them right this moment. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Candace. Lovely to see you. I hope you all had a beautiful, blessed Christmas. I know Candace and her family and some people from my beautiful friend Charlene's ministry did an outreach. Morning, Cheryl. Lovely to see you. They went and did an outreach on Christmas Day, and they gave care packages to people and ministered to people, and I think that was so amazing for Christmas Day. I hope you all had a really blessed and beautiful Christmas Day. We had a very quiet, I just want to move this slightly. We had a very quiet Christmas Day. Good morning, Ethne. Lovely to see you, my friend. This thing is just not obeying me this morning. Oh, golly, not obeying me this morning at all. Okay. I feel like I'm skew, but maybe it's just my imagination. Do I look skew to you? It feels like this camera or my phone is very skew this morning, and I don't really want to fiddle too much and give you all like seasickness. Okay, all right, let me just stop fiddling because otherwise it will never end. So we had a very quiet Christmas Day, just my 3 boys and my mum. And we had a little bit, my mum's 83 and she's amazing, but she had a little bit of a funny turn on Christmas Day, and we actually had to call the paramedics to come check out. She didn't land up having to go into hospital, but she had some... Oh, thank you, Irene. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. It's, sometimes what I see on my side of the screen and what you see on your side of the screen, it's not the same. It doesn't look the same for some reason. And I feel like everything is skewed, but clearly not. It's been a crazy couple of days. Thank you so much to each and every one of you that prayed and reached out and sent me messages and everything. After I was so ill, I went to the doctor. Oh, sorry, hold on. Sorry about that. As you can see, The coughing is still a thing. Good morning, Jenny. Lovely to see you too. Thank you. Oh, so many people joining me this morning. I'm so glad. Thank you, Jen. I went to my doctor, and which is why I cancelled the last live, because I didn't want to cough the whole time. It's just quite difficult. But and he said I have acute airway inflammation, and so he put me on some quite hectic antibiotics and cortisone, none of which I'm very good at or used to taking, you know. And they've really made me feel quite shocking. So anyway, I'm on the mend. It might not sound like it, but I am actually. I am feeling better. So a lot of what I've been going through, even just health-wise, God has just been speaking to me prophetically about the body. You know, when you're a prophet and you're called to the church or to, to a specific sphere or mandate, and we live in times such as we do today, God speaks through everything. He speaks through bodily issues. He speaks through all sorts of things. And I know quite a few, particularly female prophets, female prophets who have gone through some quite hectic physical manifestations of the message that God has been trying to bring to whatever sphere of influence they occupy. And and for me, I mean, I'm called to raise an army of women, which is one of the reasons many of you are here. But I'm also called to the church. And God has been saying to me how a lot of the physical ailments that I've gone through over the last couple of years have been reflective of the sickness in the body of Christ, you know, not as individuals, but as in the church as a whole, just some of the things that the church needs to be dealing with. And it's been quite a hectic journey. And sometimes I'm like, Lord, why? Why me? But at the same time, it does help me to pray into and prophesy into what is happening in the church, because anyway, not all of that is for a public platform, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But I am going to say that today is the 28th of December 2021, and we are a couple of days away from 2022. And so I have a prophetic word. Now, firstly, I would like to say thank you to all of you who have sent me prophetic words from other prophets. I appreciate all of them. I have not watched or listened to any of them because obviously God told me a long time ago that I need to be a voice and not an echo. And it's very difficult when you're listening to too many other voices. It sometimes gets very difficult to hear the voice of the Lord. So I've specifically not listened to anybody else's prophetic word for 2022 because I want to be sure that the word I bring is a word from God and I'm not just regurgitating or repeating anybody else's prophetic word. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, and I said this last time, God isn't bound by years or dates or times or anything like that. He's not constrained or restricted to operating within a specific year or a specific time or anything like that. And so often when I bring a prophetic word, I tend to like to say it's a prophetic word for 2022 and beyond, because some of the things that I'm going to say to you might not, they might begin in 2022, but they will go beyond 2022 into the years to come. And there are some things that I can point to that are specific to 2022, but it's not. There's just God, tends to move beyond, or He sets something up in one year to move into the next year, etc., etc. 2022, 2020 and 2021, I think for a lot of people have seemed to just run into each other. It's like we've had one long year, 2020 and 2021. And while I acknowledge and agree that God did not send COVID or cause COVID, I do know that God uses these things to shift us and shake us and move us and get us into the places and the spaces that He wants us to occupy and the places that He wants us to be. And 2022 is going to be no different. So I'm going to look at a few different things in this prophetic message and see, and we're just going to see what 2022 holds for us. Hopefully for me, it will be no more coughing. I'm just going to get some water. Right. Okay. So, let's have a look at what God has for 2022. Now, 2022 is a very interesting year. It's going to be a very interesting year, should I say. And some of the things that God has told me. So, for those of you who've been following me for a while, you'll know that the word I released at the end of 2019 for 2020 and the word I released at the end of 2020 for 2021 both contained the word focus. At the end of 2019, or actually during the last half of 2019, God said to me, focus. My people need to focus. They need to be focused on what I'm doing. They need to be focused on Jesus. They need to be focused. And, we couldn't understand, or we didn't understand exactly what that was all about until 2020 happened and COVID happened and, everything else that has happened in the last couple of years. And then you realize that the reason God said that was because our focus has been taken off Him in so many ways, and we focus on so many things that aren't the things that we need to be focusing on. So He again reiterated that word focus for me for 2022. And He gave me this for the verse, Hebrews 12, verse 1 to 2. Hebrews 12, verse 1 to 2. This is in the Amplified Bible. Therefore then, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses who have borne testimony to the truth, let us strip off and throw aside every encumbrance, unnecessary weight, and that sin which so readily, deftly and cleverly clings to and entangles us, and let us run with patient endurance and steady and active persistence the appointed course of the race that is set before us, looking away from all that will distract to Jesus, who is the leader and the source of our faith, and is also its finisher. He, for the joy of obtaining the prize that was set before him, endured the cross, despising and ignoring the shame, and is now seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So that's what it says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. It says that we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. We must strip off and throw aside every encumbrance, every unnecessary weight, and the sin that tries to hold onto us and entangle us. And we must run with patient endurance and steady and active persistence the appointed course of the race that is set before us, looking away from all that will distract to Jesus. And I think as a church, as a body of believers, we so need to learn this, because we get so caught up in the distractions and we miss the actual what's happening behind the scenes. We miss what the enemy is trying to do, and we miss what God is doing, because we get so caught up in the details. We get so caught up in in this is my opinion, and my opinion is right because I know the experts who have brought that opinion. And we've forgotten that we're supposed to love each other. And that if I think one thing and you think a different thing, I can still love you. We can still agree to disagree. We live in a society where you can't disagree anymore with people, and they completely take you out. They slay you. And unfortunately, there is no difference at the moment between the world and the church. The church are just as bad as the world is in that regard. So one of the things, God has kept reinforcing to me, focus, focus, focus. Focus on Jesus. Focus on God. When things happen in the natural and things start, ask God to show you, in Revelation where it says, come up higher and I will show you what is to come to pass. Ask God to show you what it is that He's doing. Let us not focus on what's going on in the natural, what's going on in the world. We need to know what's going on. We can't live with our head under a rock or our head stuck in the sand, but we need to be sure that even though we know what's going on, our focus is on Jesus, because He wins in the end. Okay, it's not the end yet, but He wins in the end. And we get to run this race. And also the fact that He says in Hebrews here, run with patient endurance and steady and active persistence. In other words, keep enduring, keep persisting, keep going. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how hard it is, no matter how, we long for the mountaintop experiences and we so don't appreciate the valleys. But the things that we learn about God and ourselves, the way we grow and change in the valleys or in the desert experiences or the wilderness experiences, those things are priceless. Those lessons are priceless. Those growth stages that happen in those places are priceless. So we need to focus, we need to endure, and we need to persist in running the race that God has set for us. That was the one thing, one of the things that He was saying to me. And then, okay, so basically, what God has said to me, morning Bridget, lovely to see you. What God has said to me is that the year 2022, and probably 2023 as well, definitely 2022, and going into 2023, but possibly to a lesser extent, 2022 is going to be a year of high highs and low lows. Okay, it's going to be a year of extremes. A year of high highs and a year of low lows. Now, the interesting thing about 2022, so you all know, most of you probably know, that we are in the Hebrew year 5782. Okay? So we're in the Hebrew year 5782, and next year, in September 2022, we go into the Hebrew year 5783. Okay, so remember, in my teachings on the Hebrew months, I've explained to you that there is a civil calendar and there is a biblical calendar. Okay, so we're talking about the civil calendar going from 5782 into 5783. The thing about this year, the year 5782, which is the Hebrew year that we're in at the moment, that will take us through, according to the civil calendar, that will take us through to September 2022. It is what the Jewish people, it is their leap year. Now, the thing about the Jewish leap years is that, so the Jewish people work according to a calendar, and they work in 19-year increments, and in every 19 years there are 7 leap years. Okay, and this is because they work according to the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. So they go by according to the phases of the moon, etc., etc. Now, for us, for the Gregorian calendar, when we have a leap year, we add an extra day, right? So instead of 28 days in February, we have 29 days in February. In the Hebrew calendar, they add an extra month, a whole month. So their leap year is then 13 months. Okay. And what they do is they take the month of Adar and they add another month of Adar before it. So basically, you have 2 months of Adar, Adar 1 and Adar 2. And that's what they call it in the Hebrew calendar. The interesting thing about Adar is that Adar 1 is added before Adar 2. So the extra month is added before the normal month that would normally be there. And what they call with the Hebrew, I'm not going to try and pronounce the actual Hebrew word, but when they speak about their leap year, they call it a pregnant year. A pregnant year or an enlarged year. So we are looking at a large portion of 2022 that will fall into this pregnant year or this enlarged year. And immediately that made me think again of Isaiah 54 that I spoke to you about the other day, and we spoke about enlarging the place of our tents, remember? Isaiah 54. We spoke, it's where it says, enlarge the place of your tent and let the curtains of your habitations be stretched out. Spare not, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, for you will spread abroad to the right hand and to the left. Now, what I'm saying here is that we are in this enlarged year. We are in this pregnant year. Okay, so that is the one side of the coin. Remember when we spoke about enlarging the place of our tents, we spoke about how it's so often that verse is used to justify bigger church buildings, but it's actually about your spiritual footprints, your sphere of influence, your mandate with the area that God has given you to look after or to steward for him, enlarging that space, that your spiritual footprint, okay? So we have that. We have this pregnant year. We have this enlarged year. We have this enormous promise. But on the other hand, it is also a Shemitah year. Now again, we have the biblical calendar and the civil calendar, as we all know. But according to the Hebrew civil calendar, the Shemitah year ends on the 29th of Elul, which is next year in 2022, which is basically at sunset on the 24th of September 2022. Now, a Shemitah year, and I've spoken about this before, is the Sabbath of years. So, you know, the Jews had 6 days of work and a Sabbath day, then they had 6 years of work and a Sabbath year. And in that Sabbath year, the fields were supposed to lie fallow, debts were supposed to be released, slaves were supposed to be freed. It's a year of where they actually learn to trust in God as their source, where they don't work the fields, they don't do any of those things, they trust in God as their source. It's a year of rest, a Sabbath year of rest. And so we have this pregnant enlarged year, and yet we have this Shemitah year, and the two are very different in terms of the way they outwork in the world today, because no longer does Israel follow Israel. And when I say Israel, I don't mean the Jewish people. I mean Israel as a nation, in terms of letting the fields lie fallow and forgiving debts, etc., etc. They don't follow those things anymore. And so the Shemitah year often lands up being a year of judgment. It's a year of judgment for a world or nations who have moved so far away from God that they no longer rely on him, they no longer see him as their source, in a world where people believe that they are their own God and that they can make everything happen for themselves. The Shemitah year often comes as a year of judgment. And a lot of if any of you follow Jonathan Cahn or read any of those kinds of books, you will be able to tell, and you can simply go and do your own research, that the 9/11 and the various Wall Street crashes that have happened over the years have often, I think it's something like a 99.9% of the time, occurred in a Shemitah year. So this is not a year, so this is a year a pregnant year, an enlarged year. It is also a year, particularly with your money, with your investments, to be cautious. This is not the time for high-risk investments. It's not the time to take all your money and put it on some, sure thing. This is not the time. The 29th of Elul, which begins at sunset on the 24th of September 2022. The 29th of Elul is known as the Day of Remission or the Day of Nullification, because it was on those days that debts should be wiped out and all of those things were supposed to happen. So it's actually known as the Day of Remission or the Day of Nullification. And then we go from the 29th of Elul, we go into the 1st of Tishri, which is the first month of the new Hebrew year, which is 5783. And this all happens at the end of September next year. September 2022, the 24th to the 25th, we go from the Day of Remission and Nullification into the 1st of Tishri, which starts the beginning of the new Hebrew year. So next year, pay close attention on the 24th and the 25th of February to what happens in the financial realm. And then when we go into Tishri, we go into Rosh Hashanah and the days of awe, etc. Pay attention. Tishri is often a month where the effects of the Shemitah year are felt in the first month of Tishri. So just pay careful attention. Be conservative with your money until the Shemitah is over. Be careful about what you do with it. Rather go for the lower risk investment than the higher risk investment. Be conservative with your finances and with your money for the rest of this year and going into next year for the Shemitah year. So that's why we have, not why, but one of the reasons we have this year that is going to be filled with high highs and low lows. It's a year of extremes. Basically, 2022 is going to be. And going into 2023, you're still going to see some of those extremes. It is also a year of transformation. Now, the amazing thing about the month of Adar is that it is the month of Naphtali. It's associated with the tribe of Naphtali. And it is known as the month of transformation. So you have 2 months of Adar, okay? And basically, did I write down the dates of when they start? Oh yes, here we go. So at sunset, remember the Jewish day starts at sunset. At sunset on the 1st of the 2nd, 2022, so the 1st of February 2022 at sunset, the 1st of Adar 1 begins. And that runs through until sundown on the 3rd of March, the 3rd of the 3rd, 2022, which means basically that the first day of Adar, the 1st of Adar 1, is on the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022. Now, for all those of you who have messaged me and said to me that you're seeing twos all over the place, double twos, triple twos, twos, pay attention to this. The first day of the first Adar month is on the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022. A very significant day. And then it runs through until the 3rd of the 3rd, 2022. Okay? Then at sundown on the 3rd of the 3rd, 2022, Adar 2 begins. There we go, Stu. I was thinking of you when I said that. At sundown on the 3rd of the 3rd, 2022, Adar 2 begins, and that runs until sundown of the 1st of the 4th, 2022. And then we move into Nisan, which is the beginning of the new biblical year. Okay. So basically, Adar is known as the month of transformation. That's what it's known as. It is the month of transformation. And the way the Jewish people have worked their calendar out, you get 60 days of Adar. And one of the meanings that the Jewish people put to the number 60 is the power of transformation. If you have been seeing twos all over the place, if you have been seeing 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, double 2, 22, 22, etc., 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 the year of 2022 is going to be a year of transformation, and it is undergirded by the power of transformation. That is going to be as individuals, corporately, the church, nations, etc., etc. You're going to see God move. Now, you know we've spoken about this before, right? That we are in a decade of convergence. This decade is one of the most significant decades since Jesus came to earth the first time. And this is a decade where God's kairos time and our chronos time, be it Gregorian, be it Hebrew, whatever it is converging together like different streams into one river, and God is moving sovereignly across the earth. And one of the things that he is bringing is transformation. Transformation from the caterpillar into the butterfly. Now, just bearing in mind that the caterpillar becomes completely mush before it becomes a butterfly, okay? So, but what I'm saying is that there is a huge potential for transformation in 2022, for us as individuals, for us as a church, for us as a nation, as nations on the earth. And there are going to be those of us who step into this transformation, who say yes to it, who want to do the transformation. And there are going to be those of us who will not want to do it, or won't want to be a part of it. It is a year to be set apart. Now, that is a process that has already begun. If you look at the church, if you look at the body of believers, you can already see that people are choosing to be set apart for Jesus. And please hear me on this one. I'm not talking about the vaccine, okay? The vaccine is a distraction. It is nothing more than a distraction. It is distracting the church. It is distracting the people of God away from what God has planned and what the enemy's strategy actually is, which is control and oppression, etc., etc. The vaccine itself is not an issue. So when I say that people are choosing to be set apart, I'm not saying that they're choosing not to take the vaccine. Okay, every time I've asked God about the vaccine, he's told me that it's not the issue. The vaccine is not the issue. And we are missing the issues because we're so focused on this one thing, which is exactly what the enemy always does, isn't it? He goes, look at this, 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 and then we all and then we miss everything else that he's setting up on the earth, and we miss God's strategy to counteract what the enemy is setting up on the earth. So, but it is going to be a time where people become more and more set apart, where we realize more and more that although we need to be in the world, we cannot be of the world. It's going to be a time where we are going to need to see the difference between the church and the world becoming more and more apparent. We are going to be called to be set apart and be faithful witnesses. Faithful witnesses. God has said to me that 2022 we are going to hit the ground running. Now, in the natural, we all assume that will have to mean that everything's opened up again and there's no more this, no more that, and we all, not necessarily in the spirit. In the spirit, because what the enemy is trying to do is exhaust the body of believers, exhaust us, make us unable to actually step into anything because we're so tired. And it's okay to be tired. 2020 and 2021 have been exhausting years. They've been stressful. They've been traumatic. They've been all of those things. But what we need to do, what you should already be doing, is you should already have your diary taken you right up to 2030, and you need to be asking God what it is that he needs you to be looking at for the next decade, not just for this year, for the next decade. We need to be planning ahead. We need to be getting prophetic strategies from the Lord. We need to be warring from a place of knowing what God wants to do and what the enemy's plans are. Not focusing on what the enemy's plans are, but being wise enough to know what they are. Wise as serpents, gentle as doves. We need to be looking not just to next year, but we need to be looking to the 8 years still left in this decade. We need to be sitting with the Lord, planning and dreaming with him. And when he says hit the ground running in 2022, he also has been saying to me, dream big. And when I dream as big as I think I could possibly dream, he says bigger. bigger. And when I say to him, but Lord, in the natural, it doesn't make sense to dream big. Look at what's going on. And he keeps reminding me that we are not in the natural, that we are in the supernatural, that we serve a God who rules and reigns, that we sit at the right hand of Jesus. We are seated in heavenly places. This is not a time to be looking at natural circumstances and be despondent or distraught about what's going on in the natural. This is not a time to think that you can't dream with God because natural circumstances do not allow us to dream with God. This is the time to dream big and then to dream bigger. This is the time to prepare ourselves to hit the ground running in 2022. This is the time to prepare for a year, 2022 that is going to be one of high highs and low lows. And we need to be able to celebrate the high highs, and we need to be able to navigate the low lows with our focus being on Jesus. We need to be focusing on Jesus and navigating those low lows. If we are focused on Jesus, then the low lows are not going to distract us. The low lows are not going to flatten us. They're not going to take us out. But our focus needs to be on Jesus, completely and utterly on Jesus. One of the other verses that God has been speaking to me about is Jeremiah. So in Jeremiah chapter 1, when God is commissioning Jeremiah, he says in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 10, he says, "See, I have this day appointed you to the oversight of the nations and of the kingdoms, to root out and pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant." And what God has been saying to me is pay attention to that. First, root out, pull down, destroy and overthrow, then build and plant. And as far as I can tell in the conversations that I've had with the Lord, that is God's message to the church. That is what he's doing at the moment. At the moment in the church, he's rooting out, he's pulling down, he's destroying, he's overthrowing in order to build and to plant. He has to get rid of all the structures and the organizational things and all the things that have not served the church for 2,000 years, that have actually prevented the church from being the efficient, effective weapon in God's hand that she should be. In order to build and plant his church the way it is supposed to be, he first has to root out, pull down, destroy, and overthrow. And we are in that phase. We've been in that phase ever since COVID started, 2020, 2021, and we're still there. We're still there. And it's, from what I can tell, it's going to be a year of 2022, probably into 2023, of still uprooting, pulling down, tearing down, destroying, overthrowing, before we can start looking at building and planting. And 2024 is a year that God has spoken to me about in terms of the church. So globally, this is what God is doing. And we cannot be shaken by it. But what happens when things are torn down and rooted? What happens when things are rooted out and pulled out? Things get exposed. Now, for the last 4 years, I think I've been prophesying that we need to get our houses in order, our individual houses, our family houses, our business houses, our church houses. We need to get our houses in order because God is exposing things that shouldn't be there. And he has done that. We have seen it happen in the church. We've seen things get exposed. But that is going to be ramped up. Things that the church has tried to keep hidden, things that have been swept under the carpet, abuses and things that should never have happened within the church, and that have been covered up and swept away and pushed to one side and stuck into a dark corner. Those things are going to be exposed, because in order for God to pull out and root out, he has to expose. The light of his truth is going to shine. Interestingly enough, if you do a study on the number 2022, looking at 2022, if you do a study on the number 22, it again demonstrates these two extremes. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. There are 22 chapters in the book of Revelation, and 22 times Jesus is mentioned as the light in the book of John. Okay? However, on the flip side of that, Ahab and Jeroboam, who were two of the most wicked kings, Israeli kings, ruled for 22 years. And it is a case of the light of truth in terrible darkness. And that, we quote those scriptures about the glory of God, filling the earth, etc., and the light, rise and shine your light, etc. Light shows up much more in darkness. If everywhere is light, then light is just light. But it is in the pitch dark that light shows up the brightest. And we are going to be called to be the light, the light of truth in terrible darkness. Again, that balance of those two things, that those two extremes of this year. So that's more specifically for the church. We are going to be called to be the light of truth within the church. And then the other verse that God has been speaking to me about is Psalm 2, verse 2, which says, "The kings of the earth take their places. The rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ. They say," going on to verse 3, "Let us break their bands of restraint asunder and cast their cords of control from us." And in Matthew 24, Jesus says to his disciples when he's speaking about the end, when the end is coming, and he says, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened or troubled, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in place after place. All this is but the beginning, the early pains of the birth pangs of the intolerable anguish." And we are still in the birth pangs. We are still in the birth pangs. But it is a time when the kings of the earth are going to start, even more than they have been up until now, taking their places, and even more so than has been done up until now, saying that they don't need God. They don't need a God. And remember that when the Bible talks about the kings of the earth, it doesn't necessarily mean governments of nations. It means the kings of the earth, people with leadership, people with positions of power and influence. Keep an eye on the Middle East. The Middle East is always God's prophetic clock. Watch what's happening in the Middle East. There's a lot going on there at the moment. Keep an eye on Russia and the Ukraine. Keep an eye on Russia and the Ukraine. Even if you have no interest in what happens in the earth, even if you are not someone who reads the news or pays attention, or possibly you're someone who finds all of these things distressing and depressing, we need to know what's going on. Wise as serpents, gentle as doves. And you can see God moving in places, and then you can see what he's doing. Keep an eye on the Middle East. Watch the Middle East in this time. Keep an eye on Russia and the Ukraine. Just keep an eye. God has shown me things with regard to that. I don't feel that I can release it right now on this public platform, but we will have more conversations about that as we move ahead in this year. But keep an eye on those places. Know that there will be wars and rumors of wars. And we don't focus on those things. We focus on Jesus. We focus on Jesus. The month of Adar, the Jewish people say about the month of Adar, as they're saying for Adar, is as soon as Adar begins, there is an increase in joy. They see Adar as a month of joy. So now in this year to come, we have 2 months of Adar, 2 months of joy, 60 days of transformation and joy. Now remember that joy is not always happiness. But the joy of the Lord is our strength, that we are called to be joyful no matter what is happening on the earth or in the earth. And Adar is the month when Haman, we know the story of Esther. So in the month of Adar, we celebrate Purim, which is when Esther managed to save the Jewish people and overthrow Haman, who was going to kill all the Jewish people, right? So this happened in the month of Adar, where if you read the book of Esther, and it says that Haman drew lots to see what day he should put for the slaughter of the Jewish people, and that day was the 13th of Adar. And that slaughter never happened. And apparently, according to Jewish rabbis, some rabbinical teachings, it was actually the day that Moses died. And so when Haman drew the lots and he saw that it was the day of the 13th of Adar, and he knew that Moses had died on that day, he thought that it was actually a sign that this was going to happen because of Moses dying on that day. But what he obviously didn't take count of was that God already had Joshua there to lead the Israelites when Moses had gone. So God always has another plan to save his people. So the month of Adar was the month when Esther overthrew Haman, where she managed to derail his plot to destroy the Jewish people. So we have got now 2 months of Adar, 2 opportunities to read the story of Esther. Purim is only celebrated in the 1 month, but we have these 2 opportunities to remember the story of Esther, to remember what she did for the Jewish people. And so in 2022, you are going to see even more women rising up. You are going to see there already has been such an enormous move of women stepping up, stepping into everything God has for them. And you're going to see this come even more in 2022. It is going to be an even bigger movement. God is going to move in even bigger ways in women, in elevating women, activating women, empowering women. But then high highs and low lows, remember? On the flip side of that, we are going to have an enemy. We have an enemy who has a strategy to take women down. So there are always going to be these 2 sides. And whatever God has planned, the enemy is going to try and counterattack that. And we need to stand firm as women. We need to be supporting women. We need to be loving women. We need to be encouraging women. We cannot be part of the enemy's plan to bring women down. We need to be part of God's plan to elevate women, to encourage them and empower them. And that move is going to gather momentum in 2022. It's going to carry forward into the next years, but it's going to gather momentum in 2022 in both ways. On both sides of that fence, you're going to see that. '22 is going to be a year of consistency, exactly as I read to you in Hebrews. In Hebrews, what was the verse? 12, verse 1 to 2. A year of consistency. It is also going to be a year of innovation. So we need to consistently be doing the things God has called us to do. We need to run the race, persistent. We need to endure. We need to persist. We need to go ahead. But at the same time, we need to be listening out and hearing the Lord for divine heavenly strategies for business, for the church, for finances, for resources, for all of those things, because there is going to be if we are consistent over here, God is going to bring innovation over here. If you are consistently stewarding what God has given you to steward, the way he has called you to steward it, he is going to provide innovation on the other hand. So the 2022 is going to constantly be these things on one side and the other side, consistency and innovation, high highs, low lows, being set apart, loving the world, being focused from a place of rest, a place of Sabbath, being faithful witnesses. Those are going to be the things that are going to be the earmarks of 2022. We all know that Archbishop Desmond Tutu passed away on the 26th of December. I found it quite interesting that he passed away on the Day of Goodwill. I think that was very significant that he passed away on the Day of Goodwill, and he passed away, and the fact that him and former President F.W. de Klerk passed away shortly within, F.W. de Klerk passed away like about a month ago. They passed away, and they both have passed away in 2021. And for our nation, that speaks of a removal of the old guard. It is we are going to see people who are still part of the old guard hanging on to power, but there is going to be an uprising of youth, of people, and I don't mean youth as in teenagers, I mean, solid, modern thinking, innovative men and women in their 30s and 40s that are going to start stepping into positions of power. And our current ruling party, the 2024 elections are going to be their death knell. Whether they actually lose power then or only in the next elections, I'm not 100% sure yet. But there is going to be an up and coming raising up of younger leaders that have been born into or spent the majority of their life in the Rainbow Nation, post-apartheid, that want to move toward change, towards positive change. However, as always, there is always going to be the other side of that coin. The people who want to bring destruction, the people who want to bring division, the people who want to bring racism, the people who want to bring all of those things. And as a body of believers within the nation of South Africa and on the continent of Africa, we have got to be praying into the raising up of leaders that will take South Africa into the place that it needs to be taken. South Africa, and I've shared this before prophetically, how God has showed me that South Africa is the rudder that steers the ship, which is the African continent, and that the future of the African continent rises and falls on what happens within South Africa. But he has also told me that if South Africa cannot step up to being who she is called to be for the African continent, he will find another African nation that can do that. God is very gracious and he's very patient, but eventually when he wants his plan to move ahead, he will find whoever is prepared to do that. We need to pray for our nation. We need to be praying for our nation to the leaders that God needs in place, the people that God needs in government, in every kind of sphere. We need to be praying for the right people to take in the right places. We need to be watching out for the secret or behind the scenes passing of bills. We need to be praying against spirit of death, unusual death, freak accidents, things like that. We need to be praying against those things. We need to be praying basically for God's light of truth to shine in our nation and expose everything that needs to be exposed. And we need to be praying protection over our nation. We need to be praying against the spirits that stand and war for our nation. We need to be praying against those things. Now, when one does spiritual warfare to that extent, one must be wise, and you only pray against the things that God gives you authority to pray against. You don't fight battles that aren't yours, and you don't take on giants that you were not ever mandated to take down. But we can all pray. We can all pray for our nation. We can all pray for what is to come. Because, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, Africa is the Joseph of the world. We are going to hold the keys to the storehouse. We are going to be the future solution for the problems in the world that come. And bearing in mind, remember always what God has said to me, remember the benefits of living in a third world country. Remember there are benefits to living in a third world country when it comes to the capacity to control and the capacity to oppress. We don't have that capacity within our nation or indeed within the African continent. And God is going to use that, where resolution and revolution will come from the African continent. So don't be distressed or distraught or about the fact that God placed you here on this continent in this nation, because he did it for such a time as this and for this reason. Okay. All right, I'm going to sign off shortly, but let's do a very quick recap. So we are looking at 2022, going into 2023, 2024. We know that we need to sit with the Lord and we need to strategize for the rest of this decade. We know that we are in the Hebrew year 5782, and that in September 24th of September 2022, we go into the Hebrew year 5783. We know that we have 2 months of Adar in this year. We have a year that is pregnant, which means what happens when you are pregnant? You birth something. So this is a pregnant year where we will be birthing things into the world that God has called us to birth. It is an enlarged year. It is a year to enlarge your spiritual footprint, to enlarge your sphere of influence, whatever God has mandated you. It is a year to come from a place of rest, from a place of Sabbath, from a place of resting in him. This is not striving, this is not performing, this is not works. This is resting in God. It is a year to focus on Jesus. Hebrews 12 verse 1 to 2. Focus on Jesus. Do not allow yourself to be distracted by the things that are going on, by the noise that goes on here. Keep your eyes focused on Jesus, the author and the finisher of your faith. It is a year where we are going to be called to be even more set apart, to be even more faithful witnesses. We are going to be called to be lights of truth in the middle of terrible darkness. It is going to be a year of extremes, high highs, low lows, a pregnant, enlarging year and a Shemitah year on each side of those things. It is a year to pay particular attention to the 24th and the 25th of September 2022, which is the 29th of Elul, and to the 1st of Tishri, which begins at sundown the 25th of September 2022. It is a year to, as I said in a previous message, some of you might have seen on the sons of Issachar, it is a year to put ourselves in a place where we are people who know the times and the seasons of God, where we know what he is doing, where he has shared his secrets with us, and we know how to move ahead. It is a year to keep your eye on global events. Watch the Middle East. Keep your eye on Russia and the Ukraine. That is going to play a big part in future events. Keep your eyes there. Pray. Don't just keep your eyes there. Look, watch, and pray. Ask God what it is that you should be praying into. Ask God what it is that you should be trusting for. Don't say, because I'm just a little me at the end of South Africa, the end of the African continent, I have no authority here. You have the authority that God has given you. It is going to be a year of personal revelation. You're going to receive more personal revelation in 2022 than ever before. But you need to be listening. You need to be focused on Jesus, and you need to be listening to what God has said so that you can receive that personal revelation. I'm just checking my notes to make sure I've said everything that God has asked me to say. Yes, and a year to be a faithful witness and to be set apart. It is not, none of this is bad news. It is not a year to be distraught about or sad about or worried about. Yes, they're going to be high highs. Yes, they're going to be low lows. But if we are focused on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, we will be able to thoroughly get everything we need out of those mountaintop experiences, and we will be able to grow and change and transform in those valley experiences. It is a year of transformation, and the year of transformation is embodied by the power of transformation that comes from God. Expect to see things transform. Expect to see your family transformed. Expect to see your businesses transformed. Expect to see your finances transformed. Expect to see it. Remembering always that transformation is not always an easy process, but the outcome is always good. So transformation is fantastic, and we look forward to it. It's not always easy. Sometimes we have to be smushed into nothing before we can transform into the butterfly that God needs us to be. So I am trusting that this has not filled anybody with fear, but that it has made you excited for the year to come. I'm trusting that I've given you some points that you get to sit with God and actually go over those things with him. I'm trusting that you will be able to see the positives in the year to come. I'm trusting that you will also know that this doesn't begin on the 1st of January and end on the 31st of December, that it goes through 2022 and into 2023 and potentially into 2024. Because God is not bound by those timelines. And I'm trusting that for you it starts now. That you're not waiting for the 1st of January to, new year, new you, but that you start now. You start now walking this road with the Lord and looking to see what it is that he has planned for you and for our nation and for the world. Remembering always that we are all here for a reason. And even more so as we have these 2 months of Adar, we are even more in this place where we are all called to be as Esther was and to have our Esther 4:14 moments and to say to God and to ourselves, I know that I was placed here for such a time as this. What is it that you are calling me to do, God? And then to give him our yes to whatever it is that he's asking us to do. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with all of that. Bless each and every one of you. Thank you for listening to me this morning. Thank you for being patient with the coughing and all the other things. And but I love and appreciate each and every one of you. I'm going to be back on Thursday morning because we are starting a new Hebrew month, the Hebrew month of Shabbat. So I'm going to be back on Thursday morning with a prophetic message for the Hebrew month of Shabbat that we're going into. Feel free to tune into that on Thursday at 7 o'clock in the morning. And for those of you that this has resonated with, this prophecy, this prophetic word for 2022 and beyond, please feel free to share with whomever you feel needs to hear these words for this year coming. And let's be excited. Let's be excited for what's going to happen in our nation. Let's be excited for what's going to happen on our continent. Let's be excited for what's going to happen in the world, because we are all here for that, for such a time as this. So let us be excited. Let us focus on Jesus. Only Jesus. It's all about Jesus. If it's not about Jesus, then we're wasting our time. Love you all. Bless you all. Bless you all, and I will see you all on Thursday morning. Have an incredible day today. Be blessed, and go spend some time with the Lord and find out the plans that he has for you. Huge love, huge blessings. Mwah. See you on Thursday.